Hi, we are Caroline and Levi Holt, and we're part of the family here at Holt Farms.
When I think of the people that I know that I watched wear Liberty overalls growing up, hard work, determination, perseverance, just a real appreciation for their craft and what they did and for things that lasted and for things that meant something to them. That's what I saw walking around in Liberty overalls.
Shop libertybibs.com for your pair today.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Rebecca King. In 1997, at a very young age, Rebecca married her high school sweetheart and joined him in taking over his family's generational farm. They jumped in with both feet, determined to succeed and to never look back. By April of 2006, they had completed their family with 3 precious daughters. In January of 2013, the family farm became Royal Acres Incorporated. Along with her husband and 3 daughters, they were a well-oiled machine, determined and thriving on their 2,000-acre farm. Fast forward to Father's Day 2015, Rebecca spent the day before helping Donald fix the flighting on the grain auger in the morning, and in the afternoon picking out a tie for him to wear to a friend's wedding that evening. A few days later, she was picking out a tie for her dear husband Donald to wear for his funeral. He was 42. Rebecca shares with us today about the loss of her husband, Donald, and what that did that day, not only personally, as well as what happened on their farm. You may remember hearing part of Becca's story back on episode 153 of the Rural Woman Podcast, part 1 of the Advancing Women in Agriculture mini interviews. To give a little backstory here, the day that Rebecca walked into the room to share her story in those mini interviews, she introduced herself as Billy J. Miller's neighbor. Billy J. Miller is a dear friend of mine and to this podcast, so I was so excited to meet her. And as soon as Rebecca started sharing her story, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was aware of Rebecca's story, as she had shared her own personal tale of the loss of her husband in Billy's book, Farm Wives 2, as well as shared her story in Billy's other project, The Women Among Us, both of which I have linked in today's show notes if you would like to read more on Rebecca King's story. I cannot thank Rebecca enough for coming on here today and sharing her story. I can only imagine how hard this story is to share, but I am so incredibly grateful for what she has done, not only for me, but for this audience, as I believe Rebecca's story is something that could be known as our worst nightmare. So please take her story and the advice that she shares and put it to use on your own operation and have those awkward conversations. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Rebecca. Rebecca, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. I am so happy to have you back here on the show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here too.
And I say back here because folks may remember you from the mini interviews that we did for the Advancing Women in Agriculture conference. And if people have no idea what we're talking about, they need to go back to episode 153. And I believe your story is in part 1. So before we started recording here, I was just saying to Rebecca how funny it is to me that a lot of times I don't get to meet people ever that I interview. And or if I do, it's usually after I interview them. But I've already met you. So it's like we're girlfriends having coffee today.
Fantastic. That's the way I like it.
Yes, me too. Me too. So, Rebecca, for the folks who are unfamiliar with you, tell us about yourself and how you got your start in agriculture.
Yes, I live in East Central Alberta, closer to Lloydminster, actually just off of the Saskatchewan border. And I was basically born and raised in the area, grew up on an acreage. However, my mom came from a huge family farm where we spent lots of time and learned the value of the land and, everything that comes along with farming. And when I was in grade 11, I was blessed with meeting my future husband. At the time I was DJing. I did a lot of DJing on the side to, make money to go to college and put fuel in my car, that type of thing. And he happened to be at one of the gigs that I was playing for, and he came up on stage and he asked me to dance, and I thought, wow, look at him. So anyways, long story short, from that day on, so I was very young. From that day on, we spent a lot of time together, and by the time I was 19 years old, we were married and jumped onto his family farm, and basically from there on, we built up, and we're still on that farm today.
That's a pretty cool high school job, DJing.
Yes, it is. I loved it. In fact, I did that up until I had my third daughter in 2006. And then after having 3 girls and being on the family farm and whatnot, it just was getting to be too much. Yeah. And I retired. But yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, it's great. I absolutely loved it.
See, the things you ask people about, tell us about yourself, and things you don't know about them. I didn't know you were a DJ. My high school job, I bagged groceries.
Perfect.
Yep, it worked. Put gas in my car.
That's right, exactly.
So tell us more about your operation, Royal Acres Incorporated.
Yes, well, actually, Royal Acres Incorporated happened in January of 2013. So we decided to go that route just so that we were able to do a little bit more business savvy. We had ran the farm from November of 97 up until 2013, just under sole proprietors. And it just made good business sense to move over to an incorporation. So that was very exciting for us. And just coming up with the name Royal Acres Incorporated was just a fun conversation. So anyways, so in August of 97, my husband Donald and I were married. And then by November, we had moved out to the family farm, his family farm. They were at that time a 3-generation farm. And his dad had moved to our local town of Kitscoty, and we moved into the old farmhouse and we started our family. By 2006, we had 3 girls and we were thriving. We were, working really well together. We were well-oiled machines. We had, at the time of taking over the farm, we had over doubled our acres with rented land. We did buy one other quarter. We increased our cattle herd by almost double, completely replaced all of the equipment over the years, and really started to change the landscape a little bit with, new bin site. It was all big deal things, especially at our ages, we worked really hard, but we worked together all the time. And I loved it. It was just fantastic. And now here I am today.
The highly anticipated Trailblazer Co. 2022 Holiday Gift Guide is back. Imagine one place for all of your gift giving, all while supporting a rural woman. The Trailblazer Co. Holiday Gift Guide features the products and offerings of rural women from across North America. Available in print, digital, and online. Visit the link in today's show notes or visit trailblazerco.com/gift-guide and get shopping. The book of planning, dreaming, organizing, and resources for everyone living a rural life and involved in agriculture is back. Navigate 2023 is here. It's more than just your average day planner. Designed for a rural lifestyle, Navigate includes everything from weekly and monthly planning pages to reflections and gratitude practices. What makes Navigate unique is a section dedicated to agriculture, including facts, crops and livestock inventories, a garden map, and much more. Navigate is made with high-quality paper, and the cover is eye-catching but also durable. Monthly tabs help to easily navigate the book, and the pocket in the back is useful for keeping track of those loose papers. The Navigate Planner is here to bring harmony to your story. Head to the link in today's show notes or to AlisonWeaver.com to grab your copy of Navigate 2023. Rebecca, tell us some of your favorite memories that you have with Donald working on the farm together.
Oh boy, I can honestly say that they're all my favorite memories. Yeah. We had lots of laughs. And I mean, lots of times we were so exhausted and worn out that, we'd just shake our head and look at each other. But I mean, he was just so good to me. And I know lots of times, like, let's say we were out checking the air on the air seeder and because I'm smaller, I was able to crawl through and make sure that the seeds all coming out, the fertilizer's coming out of all the boots. And I can remember one time I went to get up and I cracked my head a good one, and I thought, I don't have time for this, and he comes over and of course it's bleeding and he comes over and he gives me a kiss and he's like, come on, tough mama, like, let's keep going. Right. And so you just carry on. And he was just so good to me that way. But I do remember, oh shucks, I think that our youngest had already been born. And in the wintertime, we would run the cattle and just punch a hole in our dugout area for them to water in the wintertime. Well, Donald had the flu really bad, but he had gone out. He says, nope, maybe I just need to go out and get some fresh air. So he had gone out to water the cattle. And of course, we didn't have cell phones yet at that time that were really functional. We had cell phones, but they just didn't have great service. But of course, it wouldn't have mattered because he never took his with him anyways. But he went out and sure as shoot, a bunch of the cattle had fell through the dugout. So there was about 6 in there. And so he, thank goodness, had chains and ropes, and he managed to, with the bucket on the tractor, he got them all drug out and they were fine, except for my heifer. She was done. So I thought, oh, fantastic. So that was fine. Fast forward to that spring, we're doing spraying. At that time, we had just a 120-foot pull-behind sprayer, and we would get the water from that dugout for our sprayer. Now, yes, we had filters. We always actually even had old T-shirts that we put over the tank. So, we always made sure the water was filtered. We have no idea how, but somehow we started sucking up my heifer's hair from the dugout. And we had 120 feet of sprayer nozzle screens, tiny little screens full of my heifer hair.
Oh.
So there I am. And I mean, when you're spraying and you've got so much to do, it was so stressful. So I'm out there, cleaning all these screens and yeah. And that, like, afterwards, all we could do was laugh about it, But at the time, we were just so frustrated. But yeah, I mean, those are some of the crazy, crazy memories. But I mean, we've got some wonderful, memories of just, the girls coming out and helping us when they were little. Like, when I say we were well-oiled machines, my youngest is 6 years younger than our middle daughter. And so she always rode with me. My oldest was happy homemaker. She was in the house, always taking care of the meals at a young age, and I would have stuff prepped, but she would get it all put into containers. Then my middle daughter had an old peach box that she'd put the meals in, strap it to the back of her quad, and she'd burn out to whatever field we were at, and deliver the meals. And they were young, like 8 and 10. It was fantastic. And, as the girls continued to get older, we were all just part of it. And, everybody did everything. There was no definition between really much of pink or blue jobs around our farm, right? Like everybody did it all. So it was good.
Right.
It was good. We had a lot of good times.
Well, those just are such happy memories, and they're making me smile over here. And I just think hearing these and knowing that, I think it's quite common now. And I don't know if it's because of social media and people are trying to get the laughs or whatever it is, but I think there's a lot of times we can complain about working with our spouse. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were hard times where you probably didn't want to be looking at them. But, being able to figure out and get into the groove and being that well-oiled machine, once you find your groove, I feel like that's when the good stuff really happens for you and your farm.
Oh, it was. And I mean, we loved involving our kids. That was very much Donald. It was such a family man. Everything was all about his girls, always, all the time. There was nothing for him to shut down at feeding time, even though he knew, we had to get this in. He would shut down and go in to watch the girls, because they all played ball. And of course, every time he got there, he'd get rooked into umping, and he'd take a bit of flack from his buddy farmers, be like, oh yeah, you got to shut down for the girls, ha, 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 But now the tables have turned and they're in the same position. Right. Their kids are that age and they're shutting down to go see their girls. And it all comes full circle. But yeah, I just, as I'm reflecting back, I was thinking of a time when our middle daughter was riding in the combine with her dad and I was in the yard and she comes walking in and her eyes are as big as saucers. And she's like, Mom, there's a big bad Roger in the field. And I thought, what the heck? What do you mean? What's a big bad Roger? And so anyways, I'm like, oh, okay. Wasn't really sure what she was talking about. Well, that evening then, when we had shut down, I said to Donald, I'm like, what's a big bad Roger? Well, he started to laugh because there was a badger.
Oh.
And so she was, there was this badger. And then another time, we also had a hired hand that came out seasonally. And one spring he was out and he kind of took a shining to our youngest one. And so she was riding and he was picking rocks. And so she was riding with him going rock picking, right? And there was an area that, it was just easier for them to get out and just kind of pick a bunch of them by hand, a bunch of little fist-sized ones, that he wanted to get out there. Well, our youngest wasn't too happy about that, but she says, but it was okay, Mom, she says, because do you know the Flintstones? She says, we were singing the Flintstones, she said, while we were picking rocks. And I thought, oh my, I could just see those two out there singing the Flintstones and picking rocks.
That's amazing. I think next time I'm forced to go pick rocks, that's what I'm going to think of is this story right here.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, it was pretty cool. We were definitely blessed with a wonderful hired hand, that's for sure.
Absolutely. That's so great. Rebecca, you shared with us in your previous mini interview the loss of Donald, and you have been so gracious to come back and share your full story with us here today. I want to take us back to when we were at the Advancing Women in Agriculture conference. You had told me who you were. You had told me that you were neighbors with my friend Billy J. Miller, who has been a friend of this podcast for quite some time now. And I knew that there was a story. And as soon as you started speaking, it all connected to me and it hit me like a ton of bricks of who you were. And I had known your story. You had shared a bit of your story with Billy in her book, Farm Wives 2. And I remember reading that bit of the book and honestly believing that this is not only my worst nightmare, but a lot of women in agriculture's worst nightmare. And I know you were worried about getting emotional during this interview, but here I am, getting a little misty here. So take us back to 2015 and share with us the loss of Donald.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was the morning of would have been June 20th of 2015. It was a beautiful morning. We had finished seeding, and we were out in the yard. We were actually fixing the flighting in the auger. And so we were in the yard working on that in the morning. And then that afternoon, we had gone in to get cleaned up because we had a family friend's wedding to attend. And so we got in, and we were all getting cleaned up for the wedding. And, I'm picking out his tie and getting everybody, all the kids primped and organized and ready to go. And it was great. We had gone out that night and we danced all night long. And I mean, one thing I have to say, and it is really hard to talk about, but Donald and I loved to dance, absolutely loved to dance. And we danced the night away. It was so nice. And I didn't know that was going to be the last time I ever got to dance with him. And because the next morning we got up and it was Father's Day. So the kids had all had their gifts for their dad, and they had given them to him. And I mean, we were all feeling, tired from dancing all night and just having a good time. And so we had actually sat down and watched the ball game in the morning and drank coffee, and the girls gave him his Father's Day presents. And he had to go to Calgary that afternoon because he was a delegate for UFA at the time. And so they had meetings on the Monday. So we thought, I'll go down the night before. And my oldest was already done her exams because, of course, in June it's exam time. And so she was in grade 11, and she decided, well, I'm done my exams, Dad. Can I come with you? And he's like, absolutely. He says, you can hang out in the hotel while I'm at meetings, go use the pool, do whatever. And so about 4:00 that afternoon, the two of them took off. And so my middle daughter, she was studying because she had an exam the next day. She was 14. And we were just hanging around. And about 6:00 that afternoon, I got a phone call from the RCMP. They just asked me what kind of vehicle my husband drove. And so instantly my heart was in my throat. Like I knew there was something was not good. And I didn't want to, panic or anything. And the phone call ended, and he didn't tell me anything. And he says, okay, I'll get back to you. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I was terrified. I was shaking. I knew something was wrong. And some of it gets to be a bit of a blur, but I know that, throughout that, the kids had kind of realized that something's not right. And, what's wrong, Mom? And then the phone rang again. It was the RCMP, and they asked where I lived. And so I told them, and they didn't tell me anything still. And they hung up the phone again. And I asked them, I'm like, what's going on? They're like, no, we're just wondering where you lived, that kind of thing. And we'll get back to you again. Honestly, Caitlin, I was a wreck. I didn't know what was going on. I started making phone calls. I phoned some good friends of ours. I phoned Donald's sister. I just said, there's something going on. I don't know what. Can you guys get out here? And within about probably the longest 30 minutes of my life, I had people pouring in, and one of our local RCMP officers whom we knew came in and told us the news. Like even my ears went, like everything just started to ring. I couldn't move. And he had said that he was gone, and that my daughter was airlifted by stars to the university hospital. She had gone into shock. And from there, it was just a whirlwind. Before I knew it, I was at the university hospital, and the team had met me there. Donald had a twin sister that lived in Edmonton, and so she had got to the hospital before me, which was good because I wanted somebody with her, as soon as possible. And I left my two youngest back at home with their aunties, and got to the hospital, and they said, when you go in the room, like she was going into shock. She was absolutely glistening with glass, like just fragments of glass, and she was a wreck and kind of panicky. And they said, she just sees dark. She just sees dark, but they said that's normal. They see black, and so, but they hadn't told her. They wanted me to tell her. So I got to her, and as I got to her, they're like, okay, we're ready. So we wheeled her down to get x-rays. And as we were being wheeled down, I'm on the bed with her and leaning over, and she's like, Mom, it's just dark. It's just dark. And I said, I know, honey. And she says, where's Dad? And I said, he's gone. And then she says, I knew it. And it was just so hard. And so, yeah, we had x-rays done, and the days past that, like we sat up there for a few days at the university hospital. She had a lot of injuries. We had lots of visitors up there. One of my best girlfriends was there, and she just sat behind Marty all night, all the time, and literally picked glass out of her hair for days. And we actually vacuumed her to try and get the glass fragments out of her. She was just a wreck. But so that was on a Sunday that the accident happened, and the following Tuesday we had already managed to get home. I got back to my other babies and started planning a funeral. It was just so much. And yeah, we had lots of visitors. Planning a funeral is something that you never think you're going to have to do. And I just, before I knew it, I was facing all of these, questions and challenges. Like I had to choose a coffin and flowers and music and prayers and pallbearers, and like the whole list was just so emotionally draining. I was just going through the motions. I was so thankful for my community and family that were with me as I was going along with all of this. But I remember sitting at the funeral home, and I had lots of family and lots of friends with us, and we're going through and discussing, some of the particulars with the funeral and the viewing and whatnot. And just before we went to go in to pick out a coffin, and I wanted everybody to help me. I wanted them all to come with me. I didn't bring the kids, but they had brought me his wallet and his wedding ring. And I kept the wallet, but I kissed his ring, and I said, no, that goes with him, And so, yeah, they put his ring back on him, and that to death do us part thing was really hard. But I still wear my wedding ring till this day. So yeah, from there we went in and picked out a coffin, and it just was so much, so much.
Whew.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it's hard. Even so many years later. I'm sure it feels like just yesterday on other days.
It does. Yeah. Some days are definitely harder than others. And yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't say that he was actually hit head on by a mentally unstable driver. And that's what the accident was. And he was just outside of Camrose, and he was basically killed instantly. And just so thankful for the first responders and everybody that was there, and the person that hit him, who I'm still struggling to forgive. I don't know if I ever will. He was killed as well. And so that was very tough.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of emotions, and like I said, you never think that, well, the death of a spouse is a different tragedy than any other, in the sense that it literally changes every single thing in your world going forward. You're handed a new life instantly that you never asked for and that you didn't want.
Right.
There's so many decisions to be made, instantly, and then years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things that you thought you'd be doing together.
Well, and especially I think when it comes to losing a spouse, whether it's through illness that was long-term or, a freak accident, like you said, you didn't ask for this life afterwards. You didn't ask to live your life without your spouse. And I'm so grateful that you have shared this part of your story with us. And I know it was hard, so thank you. And it's something that I don't think you can ever plan for. And it's something that I don't think anybody ever wants to plan for. I think, there's sometimes we can go down a rabbit hole of thinking of worst case scenarios. And, that's high on the list. I'm so grateful for everyone who was able to surround you at that time and to help you through that. And like you said, to the first responders and the paramedics and stars and everyone who took care of your baby so well. And I'm so grateful that she's still here today. And
absolutely. Yeah. It's and that's the thing, like you said, you never plan for that. And just kind of going back to what I said when we decided to transition our farm and become incorporated, we just happened to have the most fabulous lawyer that helped us, develop the corporation and whatnot. And we were one of his last appointments of the day, and the office had closed, and we were still in there visiting, with him, and just not as lawyer to client. It was, friend to friend. And he was just wonderful. He just said, now you guys are young, he said. And he says, I just really, and at that time, our lawyer was actually looking at retiring and becoming a deacon. And so I think that was part of this coming out in him. And he says, I just want you guys to, go home and have that difficult conversation. He says, you've got, a young family and you two are young. And it was just us on the farm because, Donald's dad had basically retired. Well, he had retired. He had moved to town. The day after we told him we were engaged, he went to town and bought a lot in Kitscoty and started building a house. He's like, our destiny was written for us. We were perfect. You guys are getting married. You can take over the farm. I'm going to town, kind of thing, right? So, anyways, yeah, we were told by our lawyer. He said, "Go have that difficult conversation." He says, "Talk about the what ifs." And we kind of thought, wow. Okay, you never want to think about that. Like, what the heck? We were in our 30s. Why would we want to think about the what ifs, right? So we did. We went home that night, and it was in January, so it was a winter evening. We weren't outside working, and kids had all gone to bed. So I can remember it distinctly. I had a glass of wine, and he had his scotch, and we're sitting there talking, and we joked about it a bit. We're like, oh yeah, well, do you think you'll ever remarry if I kick the bucket, kind of thing, or different things like that. And he had said, well, when I die, he says, I want to be buried out on the home quarter. Well, legally we can't do that,
right.
But he had said that at that time. And, we talked about things, like we even touched on pallbearers, like who would you want to have you as your pallbearers, or, what do you think you'd do with the farm if I passed away, or, and I can remember saying, there's no way I'd ever give up this place. This is where our babies were born. This is where they're going to be raised. This is where their roots are. This is, growing up on the farm is the best life ever, and I want that for my kids. And I remember saying that to him, like, if anything ever happened, that's what I would do. And he said the same. But I remember telling him, like, if I go, I want you to, I want you to be happy. I want you to move on and, find a woman, but not one as pretty as me. And we joked, but we did have some of those, little difficult questions and conversations. Get me wrong. I wish we would have talked about a lot more, but at least we had talked about some things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, just having some sort of an idea of where to go and what to do afterwards, I think, is so important. And like you said, they are difficult and awkward conversations to have. And I think, adding a bit of humor to it makes it a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, it's still like, well, what happens if? So can you tell us about the farm after Donald's passing and the journey that it's taken to get you to where you are today?
Well, I'd have to rewind a little bit just to kind of give a bit of a foreground. The farm today has transitioned a lot. And I actually, for the most part, AFSC calls me a complicated farming situation because they helped me do up some agreements that I have with mine and Donald's best best farmer buddies ever. Like, honestly, we could not ask for better farmer friends around here. Like, they're just wonderful. And, they've just been so good to help me, and they laugh at me a lot. I know they do, but it's okay because I'm good with it. But yeah, right now I have what we call a commodity share agreement is what we call it. And it seems to work really well for me for now. And I'm just basically maintaining the farmyard and kind of going through things and transitioning. Like, I didn't keep very much of the equipment because at the time my girls were 16, 14, and 9, and we were extremely active family. The girls were in lots of sports, lots of elite sports, music lessons. We're very active in the community on different volunteer positions. And yeah, so I mean, I wanted to continue to maintain as much normalcy that way with the girls as I could. And me trying to farm fully on my own with the girls, it just simply was not feasible. And nor would I even have been able to be close to affording to hire people to help me with that. And part of that is with the accident, not only did I have liability lawsuits that took a lot of time, like in terms of years for them to be settled, I also had a litigation against my husband's family. And that's a story in itself that I'm more than willing to share. It put me through hell, which is consequently why my relationship, I think, with Dawn's family has been so difficult. There was a lot of things said, and I realized that they were grieving as well, but there was a lot of things said and done that were just so extremely hurtful that I really do have a hard time with it. And as my girls got older, they started to ask a lot of questions. And even like the older girls, they were asking a lot of questions. Like, why are you going to the lawyers so much, Mom? And what's, why is there, so much of this? And I just, finally, I thought there's no use beating around the bush. I told them, I said, this is what's going on. This is what Mom's going through, and it's been very difficult. Like in November of 97, when Donald and I were married and we moved out to the farm to begin our life together, like I'd said before, my father-in-law was, I'm moving to town kind of thing. You guys take over the farm. Fantastic. He was wonderful about being transparent and talking, at least to Donald and I found. And so he called a family meeting, which I thought was a great idea. And so it was Donald's twin sister and 2 older sisters, and then myself and one of his sisters was married, and so it was, the brother-in-law. So us 2 outlaws kind of sat back, and the 4 kids, they had a conversation, and Dawn's dad basically said, what do you guys want to see happen here on the farm? Like, do you girls ever think you're going to, want to farm? Well, no, they didn't. They were all done their post-secondary. One was married and already had a little one. They were working in their professions and thriving people, and hard workers, wonderful, really wonderful people. Anyway, so I learned over the years that in everything, but definitely in farming, that fair is not always equal when it comes to, dispersing and making things fair or equal on a farm. And so at that time, right when, like shortly after Donald and I got married, when his dad had this meeting, he said, okay, if you girls aren't going to take over the farm, he said, we've got to make it, somewhat fair. Donald and Rebecca will take over the farm. And he said, but in order to make it fair, the girls got paid out, quote unquote. So what happened was Donald and I bought a quarter off of his dad. So a quarter that was already paid for, we bought from his dad. And because I was younger, I took out the loan because I got young farmers incentives with that. And so like any land loan, it was a 20-year loan, and that money went and was dispersed to his sisters. On top of that, his dad, like I said, was transparent in saying that, the life insurance when he passes away will go to the sisters because we got the farm. perfect, fair enough, carry on. 18 years later, my husband's killed, and we buried him on a Tuesday. A couple days after that, it was early in the morning, and I got up and was sitting on the deck with my coffee, and I was reading some of the cards and letters that had been coming in, and the kids were all just absolutely emotionally and physically drained, and they were all still sleeping. And a vehicle drives in the yard, and I think, oh, this is nice. They're coming to visit. Like, I've never, rarely did they ever come to visit or come out to the farm, unless it was one of the many times that I hosted different, holiday events, that kind of thing. There was never many times at all that they would just, come out to the farm. So anyways, I thought that was nice. And so it was two of his sisters and his dad, and they come and sit on the deck, and I got them coffee, and we're visiting. And then pretty soon his dad's like, well, the girls have drawn straws, he said, for which quarters they want. And I just thought, what? Like, what's going on? This is supposed to be our farm now. And at that time, Donald and I had some land in our names, but then Donald had land with him and his dad together, right? And so I thought, this is crazy. And so I never said too much. And I think, the conversation, again, it was almost like that sound in my ear where it just started to ring. And I just thought, what the heck? Like, don't you dare think that you're going to take this away. I just buried my husband, and now you're going to come take the farm away that we've worked so hard for in the last 18 years and built up and made it what it was at that time, which was a lot different from what it was when his dad was still farming, or even when the girls lived out here on the farm when they were being raised. So I was furious. So the next business day, I was off to town, and I went to my lawyers, and I served my father-in-law with papers for the farm. So yeah, I had 3 lawsuits on the go at the time then, and between liability and trying to win the farm over, I guess, which I didn't think I would have to have done that. Yeah, so long story short, and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in lawyer bills. I'm on the farm, and to get out of capital gains, we've done some negotiations, and I'm here, and I've got the farm, which is what was intended for my girls, and that's what I'm maintaining for them now. So yeah, and that whole process, it started, the beginning of July, right after Donald had passed away, until well into the next year before all of that was settled. And it was even after that before any of the liability suits were settled. And so, yeah, it was really, really tough. And it still is, it's not at all what you think it is. I know there was a lot of people that just kind of automatically thought, oh, well, she got paid out by insurance and she's got lots of money now, that kind of thing. It wasn't the case at all. People are very misinformed with that type of thing. So, yeah. And the questioning that I had to go through from the guy that hit Donald through their lawyers, and the questioning that Marty had to, like my oldest daughter that was in the accident. Of course, that was a suit in itself. The questioning that she had was just, we had to call for recess. I don't know how many times. It was so emotional. I can't believe that we had to be put through that, in fact. And I mean, some of the questions that I got asked, for instance, were, everything was based on statistics. If they said, well, statistically, he would have lived until he was 78. And then I got asked, did you guys ever fight? Of course we fought. What couples don't fight? And why does this bear anything? And, statistically, we had I think it was a 32% chance of divorcing. That's what the divorce rate is now. And they went through all of this, and I had to prove what my annual income was on the farm. And so you get reimbursed based on what your net annual income is. And well, when you're young farmers still starting out, you don't have a huge net, especially when you're building up the farm, trying to, get it, more sustainable and upgrading and, purchasing, there's not a lot of net there. And when you have young kids, yeah. So all of that, I had to hire a farm income analyst, which costs thousands of dollars to go through and analyze. I was climbing up in the attic to get all the old books to, submit to the lawyers and whatnot. It was just, grieving was put on hold, and I had to commence defense mode. It was so hard. And so honestly, it was a long time afterwards before I was able to actually sit down and grieve, because I just had to keep going.
Yeah.
And, it's overwhelming just even talking about it again, because it's been a while since I've talked about this. And yeah,
right.
I think about it and I'm like, holy hell, how did I do that?
Well, it's just, like you said, there's so much that was piled on you all at once, and it seemed to not have any relief for a very long time. And thank you for sharing this with us. And, I think when we hear these stories, we hope to God they never have to happen to us. And I'm so sorry that they happened to you.
Well, thank you. You think you have your ducks in a row.
Right.
And we were doing so well. We had been attending a few little, transitioning classes through the winter time, and we had wills. That's huge. I couldn't imagine if we hadn't had wills where
Right.
we'd be. Just that technicality in itself. So, when I hear of families, especially farming families, because let's face it, farms are big businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And can be quite complicated. You don't have wills? Holy heck. That's not good.
Right.
And so just to make sure that you've, as much as you possibly can, have all of your ducks in a row that way really helps. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, farm transition isn't something new. But it's something that we hear more and more about. And especially as farms are getting larger and land prices are going up, these are conversations that have to be had around the kitchen table. And they're so awkward. And especially, as an in-law, they can be even more awkward because, there's legacy, there's entitlement, there's all of these different factors that come into it. And being able to separate your emotion from business in a farming family is nearly impossible to do.
It truly is. You're right. It is very difficult. And there's so many things. And one of the things I've learned is that, the green-eyed monster is a real thing.
Right.
Which, I heard, people talking so-and-so passed away and, oh yeah, the green-eyed monster got to them. And I felt victim of that almost. Well, I did. I felt victim of that after Donald passed away. I was so frustrated.
Yeah.
It was I was hurt, very deeply hurt. And so not only, I truly feel that not only did I lose my husband, but I lost some family and I lost some friends,
Mm-hmm.
Because we were always Dawn and Rebecca. And then I was just Rebecca. And oh, poor Rebecca, and I hated that. Hated it, because I firmly believe that things don't happen for a reason. The experiences you encounter in a lifetime are set out to shape and teach and somewhat help us to become the person we're meant to be. But, when I lost all of that. And so now I'm feeling that because I've gone through it, I have, that maybe the reason I'm here today is to inspire and help others to learn from my experiences. I've got a lot of them.
Right.
and apply them to their own, to realize that no matter how unfortunate situations may seem, there's always someone worse off. So, pity parties are never, ever my intention. And I realize that we all have stories, and I just really hope that, people can learn from what I've been through. And I often tell my girls when they're feeling sorry for themselves, which is okay to feel sorry for yourself once in a while. But I'll say, you know what? When you think you've got it bad, there's always someone that's got it worse, so suck it up and carry on, and in fact, I had one of my good friends when she was 36 years old. She had a 5, a 2, and a 1-year-old, and she died of a massive heart attack while she was in the shower. And that was hard on us, to lose her, and just so terrible. And I can remember she knew, because she had a bit of a heart condition, and so she kind of knew that this potentially could happen. Has she not? And she wasn't able to get in for surgery, and it was just a long string of events, just that in itself. But she had wrote letters. Her doctor had kind of mentioned, write letters, just in case. And so she did. And so at her funeral, her letter to all of us girlfriends was for us to put on our big girl panties and deal with it. And that just resonated with me when Donald passed away, and I was faced with everything. I just thought, you know what? Jill's telling me to put on my big girl panties and deal with it.
Right.
And so that's, and so I feel like I've got both of them helping me now, and yeah. Oh,
those are just beautiful gifts, I think, that, that keep on giving, and they'll keep on giving throughout your whole life. And what you've done today, Rebecca, is given us all a gift in you sharing your story. Because I can guarantee you right now, there's somebody listening who has been afraid to have a conversation with their partner or with their family about what happens if. And if this gives them any ounce of courage to go out and start that conversation, then, we've done our job here.
I hope so, because I don't wish this upon anybody. I truly don't. I couldn't. Nobody deserves it at all. And I mean, people say, oh, time heals, but I've learned that time doesn't necessarily heal. Like, we miss him every single day, but time helps to make better decisions and learn from past experiences. And I can stand a little more stable on my feet now. And with my young girls, I mean, one just got married this summer, and the other one's getting married next summer. And holy smokes, that those things continue to happen. Life continues to go on, and I keep thinking he should be here.
Right.
So yeah, it's tough. It is tough.
What are some things that you are most proud of yourself for accomplishing on your farm? Post Donald, post litigation, post all of these things. What are things today that you are most proud of yourself for?
That I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still on this family farm, and I'm maintaining it to the best of my ability for my girls. If they ever choose to, once two of them are done, they're post-secondary and working in those fields, and, they're getting married, and actually I'm going to be a Glammy in January. So I'm pretty pumped about that. And just being able to be here and maintain and have this so that the kids can always come home, because this is their home.
Right. Oh, a Grammy. Congratulations.
No, Caitlin. It's a Glammy.
Oh, a Glammy. Okay. I love that.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I have a lot of things to be proud of. I guess nobody's really asked me that, to be honest. So that's a thinker. Yeah.
I hope you take some time to reflect on that question, and you can get back to us. But I truly cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your story and being so vulnerable with us. And I just know that by what you've done here today, you have helped a whole lot of people. So thank you.
Well, thank you, because, I think through this, I just believe that sharing these things with each other is our job as women and mothers and community members, to teach each other and be there for one another, and to remember that we're not alone. And yeah, Donald was always helping others. He was just such a kind family man. And I know that me sharing all of this, especially with, your listening group, he would be proud that we're talking about this situation to hopefully help others.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca, my last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
Oh, wow. There's so many things. I often, even lately, I've just thought, man, I'm just so thankful to be out here and have the community that we have and all these, so many people that are like-minded, and know the value of hard work. And I think just that in itself, the value of hard work and discipline and being your own boss. And yeah, you learn a lot. It's on you. If something doesn't get done, it's your fault. There's nobody else to blame. So, you learn huge responsibility and that's great. But I don't know, I'm a journaler and I love to walk and I walk a lot. And oftentimes, you just kind of stop and take a deep breath and look around you. And, there's miles between neighbors and it's just so peaceful. And being out here is just, it's godly. I love it. I just love it out here.
And it's your home.
It's my home.
For listeners who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, you can find me anywhere on there.
Perfect. I will put links in the show notes for people to reach out and connect with you.
Absolutely.
Rebecca, thank you again so much for sharing your story with us here today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast, a proud member of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and admin support from Kim & Co. Online. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story.